Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY video here aboard good old Athena. This is Athena, my 1987 Warrior 38, and in a couple of years my girlfriend Ava and I are gonna move aboard. But before we can do that, as you can see, I've got a bit of work ahead of me. Last weekend I started fairing the cabin tub. Unfortunately I had to cut that a bit short because it turned out I'd run out of sandpaper. I've got the mother load of sandpaper showing up in a few days, but until then there's plenty of other stuff we can do. Follow me into the cockpit. This molded part right here used to be secured with screws and sealed with caulk. But seeing as there was and is going to be some decking that covers parts of this, I think it makes a lot more sense to go ahead and glass this in. There is some damage to parts of this, and there are also some holes I need to fill in, and it'll be good to get this cleaned up so that I can get a good idea of how much of that I need to fix before I permanently attach this to the boat. This thing is not squeaky clean yet, but it's clean enough that we can see what's going on. At some point, someone cut a slit into this, and it's been patched in a not so neat fashion. There are of course a ton of holes I need to patch, and there are some stress cracks over here. It looks like the hatch that goes with this has been digging into this corner here for quite a bit of time, but that's easily fixed. Seeing as I'm going to glass this in place, I don't need this flange back here, so I can go ahead and cut that off. Okay, so far so good. These two flanges here, I can use those to tie this into the surrounding laminate, so those I can just bevel. And as far as the bottom down here, that I am going to leave in place because that sits flush with the front of the hatch. It's Tuesday afternoon and I have unfortunately left my work clothes aboard Obelix, so I'm not going to be able to start sanding or epoxying anything on this today because I don't want to ruin my good clothes. So instead, I'm going to spend the rest of the day tidying up here aboard the boat so that I don't trip over my own mess. Ta-da! I don't know about you guys, but I certainly enjoy working aboard the boat a lot more when it's neat and tidy. I've also tidied up a little bit down below because when Ava gets here and sees Athena for the first time ever in real life, I don't want her to run screaming for the hills. I know I haven't shot a ton of video today because most of what I've been doing here aboard the boat is not that interesting, but thanks to the magic of video editing, we're gonna cut and it's gonna be Thursday afternoon. Bam! Just like that, it's 2 days later. Now, let's get busy. While handling this thing, I've noticed that it feels a little bit flimsy, especially here along the edges. Bendy, bendy, flexy, flexy. That is certainly not something that screams high quality. It's not really a structural issue, but I would like this to feel nice and solid. Enter stage left, a little bit of leftover foam from when I rebuilt the deck last summer. Coincidentally, this is pretty close to a snug fit, so the foam won't require a lot of trimming. Yep, that seems like a nice snug fit to me. Everything seems like a nice snug fit, but before I start mixing up epoxy, I have to clean the inside of this and give it a quick sanding. This is just a little bit too narrow for my Makita 9031 to get in there, so this is going to be hand sanding. I think I've spent as much time sanding this as I want to. The next step is to coat it with some unthickened 105. The trick here is to use as little as you possibly can. If you use too much, it's just going to act as a lubricant and make everything more smushy. The foam I'm using here is a bit of leftover from when I replaced the deck, so it's a grit scorn, meaning it's flexible so that it can conform to the curvature of the deck. I'm just going to go ahead and give all of these little cuts here a brush with some unthickened epoxy. I've thickened some 105 with some 406. 406 is great for general bonding and putting down fillets, or in this case for gluing down foam. This is the exact same process I used for the deck last summer, and this is certainly bringing back some fond memories. This is all gooped up now. I'm gonna leave this alone until tomorrow once the epoxy is cured. Then I'm gonna start trimming the foam, and then I can lay up glass over it. That way this is gonna feel a lot more solid, and there aren't gonna be any sharp edges for you to cut yourself on when you're crawling around inside the cockpit locker. It is Friday afternoon, the weekend is finally here, and I've left this thing to cure overnight. So now let's go ahead and trim this excess bit of foam. That takes care of the rough trim. Now, of course, you guys can't feel it, but this thing is already feeling a lot more solid. I've rounded over all of the edges here. That's going to make it a lot easier for me to lay up glass, and it's also going to make sure that this thing is nice and soft to touch whenever I'm crawling around inside the cockpit locker. I'm going to use a little bit of thickened epoxy to fill in some of the low spots here. That's just so that it's, again, going to be easier for me to lay up glass. This thing is starting to look pretty smooth. Now let me just go ahead and clean up the last little bit of excess here, and then we can get busy laying up glass. I've got 2 layers of 450 gram biaxial on here, and that should be plenty. While I've got the epoxy out, I might as well take care of the very last 4 holes I need to patch here aboard the boat. Ta-da! And with 2 final applications of Hole Be Gone, I am now done patching holes. Certainly not a huge milestone, but a milestone nonetheless. I'm going to call it quits for today, but tomorrow we're going to take another look at the frame for the hatch here in the cockpit, and we're going to get to some glorious, glorious sanding. Good morning, guys. Let's take a quick look to see how the frame is doing, and then we'll get to all of these exciting looking boxes. Oh, would you look at that? Sandpaper, the perfect gift for the guy that's got everything. Oh, even more sandpaper. Yep, you guessed it. More sandpaper. And then one last box containing more sandpaper and some guide code. You might be asking yourself, wait a minute, how much sandpaper does one guy really need? The answer to that question is always more. But that should be plenty to get me started. I do have one package here that's not sandpaper related. In last weekend's video, I mentioned some folding pad eyes for clipping in the cockpit, and this is one of those. These are not exactly hyper affordable at 30 or 35 euros a pop, but they should be very good quality. If I'm not mistaken, this thing has a braking load of 5 tons, so this should be plenty strong. There will be a total of 4 of these here in the cockpit to replace the 4 U-bolts. The last items in the box from SVB is a bunch of hinges, because I need to find a hinge that can secure the cockpit locker hatch to the frame. And that brings us, you guessed it, full circle back to the frame. I know it won't look like it on video, but I've spent a couple of hours sanding this thing, and it is really starting to come along nicely. So much in fact that I think we might go ahead and glass this in a little later today. But first, a little bit of trimming over here is required to get this thing to sit nice and flush. Now that frame should sit nice and flush. Let's see how this fits now. Yep, that is perfect. Dang it, I've just realized that I should probably go ahead and fair the holes down here that I've patched before I put the frame in place. Otherwise it's going to be very difficult for me to get to those. And that sadly means I can't glass in the frame today, which I'd kind of been looking forward to. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, at least parts of glassing in that frame should still make it into this video, which is kind of nice. Now I could go ahead and mix up some fairing compound and fair those holes right now, but I think it makes more sense to hold off until a little later today. The reason being that the next item on my to-do list is to start sanding the cabin tub. And once I've sanded that, I think I'm bound to find some low spots, and those are going to require fairing compound. Well, this is super annoying. There is an alarm, an audible alarm coming from the boat next to me here. I don't know if the mic is picking it up, but it's pretty ear-piercing. It's not that loud, but it's very annoying. I can see all of his lights aboard are on, and his, well, let's call it shore power, is disconnected. I would of course be happy to help the guy that owns this boat by hooking up his shore power connection and stopping that alarm, but I don't know if that's okay to do. I don't know if he's in the middle of messing with his AC system aboard the boat, so I'm not going to touch it until I've got an okay to do that. I've reached out to the owner of the shed I'm in to see if he has some way of reaching the guy that owns the boat. So yeah, until I hear something, you guys are just going to have to put up with the noise. Let's get back to the regular scheduled programming and burn through some of my new sandpaper. I've got all of these awesome looking manual sanders from Flexicat, and I am itching to take them for a spin. But first it looks like there is a little bit of assembly required. There are some handles here, and those look pretty straightforward to put together. Yep, that certainly wasn't difficult. There was another item attached to this, and that's this doohickey. It looks almost like some kind of fence that goes here. Oh, I think I know what this is, because without this, the Flexisander is, well, flexible, but as soon as you put this in, it's rigid, so you kind of have two different sanding modes. That's kind of clever. For what I'm doing here, I believe I want this to be flexible, so let's go ahead and remove this. Flexisander offers two different types of manual sanders, the fancy ones with dust extraction and the regular kind without any dust extraction. At least for the types with dust extraction, I've seen on their website that they recommend the use of Apranet, which is a sanding net. So that's why I've picked up 2 rolls of this stuff. Now for the exhausting part, the actual sanding. Cue headphones and a book from Audible. A quick update on the boat here next to me. I managed to get a hold of the owner and he's on his way down here. So hopefully soon that annoying sound will go away. Good morning, guys. I spent a grueling 4 hours yesterday sanding the cabin tub. I am sore something fierce, but please keep in mind that for my day job I am stuck behind a desk, so this is quite a change of pace for me. But at least the cabin tub is starting to look pretty nice. After I was done sanding, I went ahead and applied a little bit more fairing compound to the low spots I'd found. But yeah, I think this is getting pretty close. Most of the cabin tub is going to get covered in nunskit, so truth be told, it's not really necessary for me to fair it because that nunskit is going to hide any and all defects. But the reason I wanted to go ahead and ferret was to give myself a little bit of a chance to get some practice in with the tools before I move on to some of the areas that aren't going to get an unskid and where any defects are going to show up. And speaking of those tools, I have kind of an ambivalent relationship with this thing, because on the one hand, that's my reason for being super sore today, but on the other hand, it's a pretty awesome tool. It's comfortable to hold, there are lots of different ways of gripping it, and the dust extraction is amazing. The reason there is a little bit of dust on this thing now is because I disconnected the hose to see what kind of difference that would make. And that did make a huge difference. With the vacuum connected, there is absolutely no dust. You guys will get plenty of chances to see these tools in action once we move on to some of the critical parts, like for instance the forward part of the cabin tub here. For now, let's get back to the frame in the cockpit. As I mentioned I would, I've applied a little bit of fairing compound to the areas I've patched here. So let's go ahead and get those sanded, and then we can start glassing in the frame. Over here on the big patch where the shore power connection used to be, I do have some quite noticeable low spots, but I think those are far enough away from the frame that the frame is not going to interfere with me fairing those later on. Looking at the outside of the frame, this lip that's left here is a little too flimsy for me to tie the new laminate into that here on the outside, so instead I'm going to be doing that on the inside. Of course, I can't just start laying up fiberglass in this big open gap here. I need some kind of backer, and I've got this. These are leftovers from when I installed the wooden slats in the V-berth aboard Obelix, and it just so happens that the radius on these corners matches almost perfectly with the radius here between the cockpit and the cockpit coaming. So if I put one down here and another one up here, that should be perfect. The only thing that's left for me to do before I'm ready to start laying up fiberglass is to bevel the inside edge of the cockpit coaming. And all of that fun is going to take place here inside the cockpit locker, right up here. Now, if there's something more fun than sanding fiberglass in a confined area, I sure as heck don't know what it is. I am gonna be itchy as all heck, but at least I'm done sanding down here. What I've done down there in the cockpit locker is just to sand all of the surfaces where I'm gonna be laying up glass so that I get a good bond, and I've also smoothed out any sharp edges so that it's gonna be easy for me to get the glass to lay flat. As you can hopefully see, I haven't put a huge bevel on this, I've just rounded over the edge, and that should be enough because in here, I don't care about the fact that there's going to be a little bump of fiberglass up here. My first step is going to be to get thickened epoxy underneath the flanges and get the frame secured with some screws. Now there's 0% chance of the frame moving around on me, but let's just check that the hatch still fits. Call me paranoid, but I just want to make sure I haven't warped the frame out of shape when I tighten those screws. Let's see. That looks okay. I want to clean up any squeeze out here inside the cockpit locker before the epoxy has a chance to cure. But I haven't forgotten about last year's big blob of thickened epoxy in the eye, so on go the safety glasses. I've gone ahead and cut the fiberglass I need, and I've also wrapped my two little supports in plastic. I'm going to secure these to the boat with a few screws just to make absolutely sure they don't start moving around on me. The two pieces of mahogany now feels nice and flush here on the back. Not that that's terribly important because I am still going to have to do some fairing here, but it's nice to be close. This is what the back of the frame looks like now. As you can see, it's all nice and smooth, and all I'm going to do now is just lay up glass from up here all the way down to here. Fortunately, it is nice and warm here in the shed today, so getting this fiberglass wetted out shouldn't be difficult. There is sadly no way I can fit myself, that piece of laminate and the camera in the cockpit locker. So yeah, you guys are just gonna have to imagine how that gets smushed in place. Now that might end up sagging on me, but we'll just have to wait and see. For now, it's looking at least okay, although I got some dirt in it there, but that's not important. I'm afraid I've been a little bit too greedy and attempted to lay up too much laminate so that it's too heavy and, like I said, it'll sag, but yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Even if this doesn't go quite according to plan, it's not a big deal. That's one of my favorite things about working with fiberglass. A bit of grinding, and then you can try again. No matter what happens, I really like this new reinforced version of the frame. It feels really solid, there is absolutely no flexing, and there are no sharp edges for me to cut myself on. I'd say it's pretty dang spiffy. Once the epoxy is cured, I can go ahead and back out these screws, put a bevel on this, and then tie this into the rest of the boat, and it'll be rock solid. And even better, it's not gonna leak like it did before when the hatch was just sealed up with some caulk. Well guys, I am out of time for this weekend. I need to start rendering this video within the next 15-20 minutes to be able to get it out tonight. As far as next weekend, the weather forecast promises extremely hot and extremely sunny weather. If that happens, we're gonna have to come up with something else to do than fare the cabin top because it's gonna be too hot up here for me to do that. So we'll see, but there are plenty of other projects. And that is going to be it for this video. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!